The message tonight that I want to talk about, I'm calling it Only God's Opinion Matters. And the past few weeks, we've been looking at this king that's talked about in the Bible named King Asa. And Asa's whole life was characterized by what he could do when he trusted in God, when he trusted in God alone. We saw that he had this problem where Israel had all these idols in the land. And he got rid of the idols, and then the land had peace. And then he just got kind of comfortable, and he started trusting in other things. And when he started doing that, conflict and war started breaking out in the land. So he had to keep learning, you got to get rid of all the idols. Do you remember a few weeks ago I was talking about idols in the Bible? You know, they're these statues people would bow down to. But the real point of what we want to get from that is that an idol is anything that comes between you and God. We probably don't have any statues in our house that we bow down to and worship and stuff like that. Hopefully we don't have that going on. I mean, some places do that, but hopefully that's not an issue for us. However, we can't let anything else become more important than God in our lives. Because if it is, that means that's an idol. And getting rid of the idols like Asa was doing, there's a lot of work in doing that. That had a lot of risks to it. People liked their idols. People don't want you taking away their idols. When Asa would cut down the idols and tear them down, I mean, there was a lot of peer pressure on him. Even though he was the king, there was a lot of peer pressure on him. It was going to make him really unpopular if he was going to go after the idols. Peer pressure is tough. Now, to think about the idols in our own lives. What are some of the idols of our day? Anyone have any ideas for what some of those could be? Yeah. The mirror. Okay. Is that a struggle for you? Tearing yourself away from that mirror? Get sucked into that. Maybe you are doing a little bit of worship in there, and I mean, we understand. TV. Thank you. TV. Now, and again, I'm not saying any of these things are bad, but if they become more important to you than God, what was the example we used a few weeks ago? Like, if you're saying, oh man, I know I should take a few minutes to pray today, or I should read my Bible before I go to bed, but I just want to, spend another 30 minutes watching this show. Sometimes we do that. And it comes between us and God. Friends can come between you and God. Friends can be an idol very easily. Yeah. A phone? Thank you. That's a great one right there. Now, when you take away people's idols, you're going to experience a lot of resistance. Like, let's say I come to a teenager, and I'll just use you for a second. I come over to this teenager and I say, hey, Christina, listen, I think your phone's becoming an idol to you. And I'm just going to have to take that away. I'm sorry. I think that you're obsessing over it too much, and I'm just going to have to remove that from your life. And I take her phone over here with a sledgehammer, and I destroy it. Okay? Am I going to encounter some resistance from her on doing something like that? Now think about Asa here. Asa was going around removing all the idols of the land. People did not like that. That made him very unpopular with a lot of the people. But he had to do it, and why did he have to do it? Because he knew it was the right thing to do. He knew that these were things that were taking people away from God, and he had to get rid of them. So, a lot of people are going to get upset whenever you take away the idols, and a lot of people got upset with Asa. Now, let me show you a few verses here about him. The Spirit of God came on Azariah, son of Oded. This guy is like a prophet, and he's going to go give a message to the king. And it says, he went out to meet King Asa and said to him, listen to me, Asa and all Judah and Benjamin. The Lord is with you when you are with him. If you seek him, he'll be found by you. If you forsake him, he will forsake you. Okay? Azariah is the prophet here, and he gives this prophecy to Asa. And hearing this is going to energize Asa to say, okay, we got to get the idols out of our land. We really got to do something about this idol problem. Did Azariah come to him with this prophecy and say, now Asa, here's what I want you to do. Become the most popular king ever with your people. Make everybody happy. Make everybody successful. Fix the economy. Crack down on crime. Is that what he told him to do? No. He said, care about what God cares about. Think about what God thinks about. If you want God on your side, he said, don't ignore him. If you ignore God, he's going to ignore you. Who wants God on your side? I want God on my side, yeah. So he says, don't ignore God or he's going to ignore you. And he basically, if I could condense, and there's more to what he said, but if I could condense it all down, only God's opinion matters. That's the truth he instilled in Asa. Here's when Asa heard this, he was so energized. Here's what he did. When Asa heard these words, and the prophecy of Azariah, son of Oded, the prophet, he took courage, and he removed the detestable idols from the whole land of Judah and Benjamin, and from the towns he had captured in the hills of Ephraim, and he repaired the altar of the Lord that was in front of the Lord's temple. Okay? These are not things that would have made Asa popular. He's taken away the idols. He's tearing them down. These are things that would have made people say, like, what the heck, man? You know, like if I took her cell phone here and just smashed it, the people are going to be like, what are you doing? You know, these are our idols. That's not yours. But Asa knew, actually this quote that Albert Einstein once said, that what is right is not always popular, and what's popular is not always what's right. Courage. It said there he had courage. That's a real important word to this story, because the crowd wanted the idols. Asa knew that if they wanted God's blessing, they had to go. And even though the crowd outnumbered him, he knew that the crowd was wrong. There was this show on a few years back called Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? And it started off with Regis Philbin back in like the 90s. And they've had a few other hosts over the years. But has everyone in here probably seen Who Wants to Be a Millionaire at some point? You never have seen it? Okay. When I was like 4th grade, 5th grade, I mean, like everyone was watching it. We'd go to school the next day and everyone's talking about what happened the night before and Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
Sometimes in mission nights on Wednesdays we watch it as a class.
You should watch it in church? Okay, see how important, that was probably an idol then, actually. If you're watching it at church. The teachers wanted to watch it. Yeah, so Who Wants to Be a Millionaire was big. Okay, so one of the cool things they would do in that show is that all the people in the audience had a keypad, and you know there would be like the questions that would be asked, A, B, C, or D, and if the person playing the game was stumped, he could use what was called one of his lifelines. And they had 3 different lifelines every time they played, okay? And one of them was called Ask the Audience. And so they'd say, you know, I want to ask the audience here, and everyone in the audience would get to vote on what they thought the answer to the question was, A, B, C, or D. I shared this video one time last year, but I thought, well, I'll use it again here because it really goes with this sermon too. So this is a little familiar to some people. But I'll show this clip here of people, sometimes when they would ask the audience what would happen.
11 away from the million, David. Historic vessels is the next category. What does the M stand for in RMS Titanic, the full name of the historic ship that sank in 1912? Military, monarch, naval, medical.
Going for 2,000. Which of the following is the correct spelling of a word that means the study of family ancestries and histories? Genealogy, 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 genealogy.
Well, I would like to ask the audience on this one, please.
All right, audience, David needs your help. On your keypads, vote now.
I think I know what it is, but...
Okay.
Oh, I'm going to ask the audience.
All
I
right.
think they know.
All right, audience, Tanya needs your help.
Okay. Can I ask the audience, please?
You can. Right, audience, this is the question. It's a serious one. It's worth £20,000. Here it comes. Traditionally, what is the only occasion when alcohol is allowed into the chamber of the House of Commons? There are only 2 possibilities. B is budget speech, or C is state opening.
I think I should use my lifeline, my friend.
You phone a friend?
My phone a friend.
Okay.
Is that a good idea? Is he going to know this?
Well, do you have someone who's into animals?
Not really.
No.
Not really.
Maybe the audience is a good idea.
Okay, let's try the audience.
Want to try the audience?
Let's go with the audience.
Now, let's see what they say. We need your help, audience.
91% believe it is monarch. It's a big number.
That is the kind of percentage I like. Anything over 80 is
Good
a
for you.
passing grade, yes. I believe in the passing grade mark.
Oh,
81% are
Gosh.
saying state opening.
that's big.
That's huge.
That's big.
19% are saying budget speech.
Okay, 72% believe it is genealogy.
That's what I thought, guys. Well, New Yorkers are the smartest people in the world, so the answer is C, genealogy. Final answer.
Well, I was really torn between them, but they look a nice bunch, don't they?
I will go with B, Monarch. Final answer.
So I'm going to go with the audience. I'm going to say state opening.
Final answer.
Yes.
It's not.
Oh.
B.
Oh my gosh, it is not monarch. It is male, as in royal male ship. I know the audience is in total shock.
I think we were all stumped by that.
I tell you what, 81% of this audience are wrong. And that's one of the highest percentages I can ever remember being wrong. Oh, that's awful. 81% are wrong. The right answer is the budget speech.
Whose stupid idea was it to hold the audience?
The audience does not always get it right, do they? And Asa knew that. He also knew something else. Only God's opinion matters. So what Asa said when it came to this decision, do I tear down the idols? Do I do the right thing? He says, I'm going to go with God. I'm going to care about God's opinion, and I'm not going to worry about everyone else's. And that takes a lot of courage to do that, to be that person who will stand up and say, I'm just going to do what God says is right. Because at the end of the day, only God's opinion matters. So here's a little bit of what they did when they took down these idols. It said they assembled at Jerusalem in the 3rd month of the 15th year of Asa's reign. At that time they sacrificed to the Lord 700 head of cattle and 7,000 sheep and goats from the plunder they had brought back. Sometimes serving God can require a sacrifice. Like sometimes people will think that you are weird if you're a Jesus follower. Sometimes people will think you're weird. Sometimes people think I'm weird. And sometimes it's because I follow Jesus. And sometimes it's not. But sometimes people will think you're weird if you do what God says is right and you don't do what other people are doing. My sister was attending Pittsburgh State University for school. She graduated last May. She'd been attending there for a few years, and I think in her last semester there, she had this teacher who was obsessed with sex. He talked about it. Every class he would find ways to bring it up. The class was not about that. It was a class about communications. But he wanted to that was what was always on his mind. He was always making sexual jokes in class. Now in college, teachers can get away with stuff like that a lot more than like they could in high school. But he was always doing this in class. He was always finding a way to bring up subjects about pornography and stuff like that. And he started showing this movie in there. He spent like 2 or 3 class periods showing this movie. And this was a movie about pornography. And the movie had pornography in it. And my sister's like, I'm not going to class. She's like, I don't want to go watch that. And you know what happened when she did that? Some of the people thought she was weird. Some people thought it was weird that you don't want to go to a college class and see that. But, people acted like she was strange. The teacher thought there was something strange about that. People thought, well, you must be really immature if you can't handle watching some sexual stuff in class. People can think you're weird sometimes when you're doing the right thing. My sister just said, you know what? I don't want to be exposed to that. So she said, it might hurt my grade a bit because I'm not going to be able to do this assignment on like writing a paper on this movie or whatever she had to do. She said, it might hurt my grade a little bit. Might make people think I'm kind of weird. But she said, I'm just not going to go expose myself to that because this was like a movie had nudity and all kinds of stuff in it. So anyway, why'd my sister do that? Because she knew that God's opinion mattered more than her teachers and more than her classmates. And she knew that only God's opinion matters. She was willing to sacrifice a little bit of her grade or sacrifice, a little bit of what people thought of her in order to do what she knew was right because she wanted God on her side. And Asa wanted God on his side. So here's what else happened. They entered into a covenant to seek the Lord, the God of their ancestors, with all their heart and soul. And all who would not seek the Lord, the God of Israel, were to be put to death, whether small or great, man or woman. Sometimes you have to put your desires to death if you want to follow after God. Why do we have to do that? Why do we have to put our desires to death sometimes? Asa knew what's true for all of us too, that someday we have to stand in front of God. And someday each one of us has to give an account of our lives in front of God. And we have to answer for whose opinion mattered the most to us. If it was the opinion of other people, or if it was the opinion of what God thought. Someday we have to answer for that in front of the person who's the only person whose opinion matters. And then Asa's greatest challenge came. Okay, this was probably the scariest thing that Asa had to do. This was probably like the biggest sacrifice he had to do in order to get all the idols out of his land. What did he have to do? King Asa also deposed, that means fired, removed from the position, his grandmother, Maacah, from her position as queen mother because she had made a repulsive image for the worship of Asherah. Asa cut it down, broke it up, and burned it in the Kidron Valley. Asa had to stand up to his grandma. Okay? That really takes a lot of guts. Like, his grandma she had this position of being, she's called the queen mother. She's basically like someone who worked in the palace and was like an advisor to the king. And everyone respected her and honored her. And he said, Grandma, you're fired because you made an idol. You know, who wants to stand up to their grandma? Does anybody in here want to stand up to their... Who, you want to? Would anybody in here... Yeah, who would be afraid to stand up to their grandma? I would be afraid to stand up to my grandma. I'd be afraid to stand up to some of your grandmas. I've met your grandma. I wouldn't want to get in a disagreement with her. Yeah, I wouldn't want to stand up to anybody's grandma. But Asa had to stand up to his own grandma and say, Grandma, you're fired because you've done something wrong. And you shouldn't be in this position of leadership anymore. And he removed his grandma from being the queen mother. So that was probably a scary thing to do. Like, when I read this story, it's always the line about the grandma. Like, I kind of read through the other stuff like, whoa, he fired grandma? Like, that's getting pretty extreme. But Asa knew only God's opinion matters. It matters even more than grandma's opinion. Okay? Last verse. They took an oath to the Lord with loud acclamation, with shouting and with trumpets and horns, and all Judah rejoiced about the oath because they had sworn it wholeheartedly. They sought God eagerly, and he was found by them, and so the Lord gave them rest on every side. So they got rid of the idols, they turned to God, they found God, and he gave them rest. And just like Israel, what we have to do sometimes is we have to make a fresh commitment to God and say, God, I'm sorry, I've let too many things get more important than you. I've let too many other people's opinions matter more than yours. We just have to say, I'm sorry, God. Only your opinion matters. Sometimes we just have to get to a point and do that. So I want us to do that tonight. Emily, could you come up to the piano for a few minutes? And here's what I want you to do, just in your seat. I just want you to ask yourself, if I let other people's opinions matter more to me than what God thinks? Lord Jesus, I just pray that you give us the courage tonight, like Asa had the courage to stand up for what's right. God, I just pray that you give us that courage and that strength to do that. I pray that you give us a real desire in our hearts to know what you want, God, to want to find out what your opinion on things is, and to decide we're going to follow after that and not let other things become more important. If we have to sacrifice to do that, Lord, if we have to put our desires to death to do that, God, I just pray to give us the courage and the strength and the conviction to make the changes we got to make to follow after you, to do what's right. Yes, Lord, I just pray that for everyone in this room. I just pray you'd give us one of the strongest and best weeks of our life this week, and to take us home safely tonight and bring us back safely next week. Lord, I just pray all this in Jesus' powerful, mighty, and loving name. Amen.